The time is now for the Dr. Bob Sports Podcast. I am Tanner. I am our head of analytics, and I am in my 7th year working alongside Bob, originating our NFL and college basketball bets. And today, as always, I'm joined by our digital media specialist, Grant. We are officially in the NFL, Taylor's version.
Yes, we are. We are in Taylor's world right now. She put Travis Kelce on the map. So, I mean, doesn't get much better than that. I'm happy for my guy, Trav, even though I think that he put her on the map.
And I can't imagine how many cutaway shots we're going to get in Sunday Night Football this week. I think she's going to that game as well. So it's going to be part football and part Taylor Swift. And we're actually going to touch on a full breakdown of that game later on in the podcast.
Yes, we are. But let's jump right into our first segment where we will be grading the scriptwriters on how they did for episode 3 of this NFL season. So the Broncos came in as 6.5-point underdogs, and I hope everyone played the alternate line here. Hopefully you headed at plus 50.5 because this was ugly. Sean Payton had mentioned that Hackett might have performed one of the worst coaching jobs in NFL history, but he was 2-1 at this time last year, and he never let up 70 points in a game. But the story of this game was that the Broncos allowed 726 yards, had 24 missed tackles, 3 turnovers that ended up in 21 points, and they were 1 for 4 in the red zone. I mean, this team seriously looked like they gave up after halftime, and now the finger pointing has begun. The trade rumors are swirling.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3-time All-Pro safety Justin Simmons seems to be at the top of that list in terms of who is likely to get moved for the Broncos, and he didn't play last week, so he wasn't a part of that atrocious defensive performance, and the Broncos won him out there again this week before a trade just to show teams that he's back fully healthy. So Simmons is practicing this week, and if the Broncos lose in Chicago, we could see a full-on fire sale for Denver.
Yeah, I mean, we might be setting up for the worst football game that's ever been played because the Broncos get to take on the Chicago Bears, as you just said. So, I mean, looking at last week, the Bears have lost 13 straight games dating back to last year, which is the longest active streak in the NFL. Eberflus is 3-17 as a head coach, making him one of just 10 head coaches since 1970 to lose 17 of their first 20 games. I mean, this is the first time since 1952 that 2 teams are playing after combining for 111 points against the week before.
Yeah, I mean, and you said he's 3-17, but you got to remember that one of those games was a complete fluke in that monsoon against the 49ers last year when they won. So he could very well, if he didn't get those weather conditions, he could very well be 2-18. And normally I would say that Eberflus is on the hottest of hot seats right now. But who would the Bears even make the interim coach? I mean, defensive coordinator Alan Williams resigned. You can't do offensive coordinator Luke Getsy. And so it's either, keep Eberflus with the job or, go with the career special teams guy, Richard Hightower. I mean, I have no idea what the Bears are going to do with the coaching situation the rest of the way if it stays this ugly.
Yeah, and looking back at that game, the Chiefs essentially did this damage in 2.5 quarters. I mean, it appeared like they could have scored 80-plus points if they had chosen to. But this was supposed to be Justin Fields' epic game, and he went out first half, 4 for 10, 40 yards and a pick. What? And then he would go out and finish with a stat line of 11 for 22 for 99 and a TD. And I think Big Cat said it best. The Bears are the invite your new girlfriend to the game that you know will be a blowout win, so you look awesome. And I mean, I genuinely feel bad for both fan bases, but statistically, there's some good news because there is a 99.8% chance that one of these teams gets their first win this week.
Well, that would be incredible if it was a tie and both of them remained defeated on the season. But yeah, I mean, the Broncos, surrendering 70 points last week and the market actually moving towards them from the look ahead. So the look ahead was Broncos -2.5, and now it's Broncos -3, which just really speaks to the state of the Chicago Bears. And Justin Fields did try to get back to his game from last season, raising his average air yards per attempt from 5.3 in the first 2 games to 15.1 last week. And Fields also had 11 rushes in Kansas City. However, Chicago's offense was shut out completely until garbage time.
Yeah, what can Fields do to find some more success this week?
Well, I think the only way out of this is just to continue throwing deep and scrambling. I mean, Denver's defense is allowing a league high 79% completion rate on throws with at least 10 air yards. And, Fields probably won't face as much pressure as he had. Denver's defense only has a 21% pressure rate, and the next worst defense in the NFL is the Jaguars at 28%. League average is 35%. So this Broncos defensive line just hasn't been able to get after the quarterback. And Chicago's offensive line will have guard Nate Davis making his debut for the team on Sunday after he signed a 3-year, $30 million contract this spring.
Yeah, the one part of the Bears that's actually looked decent this year are their running backs. I think they're going to be able to find similar success as the Dolphins did last week.
Well, I mean, the Bears are targeting running backs on a league high 30% of passes, and the Broncos are the only defense in the NFL to allow more than 200 receiving yards to opposing running backs. So I don't know. I think that the Bears, if they can't score on this Broncos unit, I have no idea. I mean, they might as well just bench Justin Fields now because it's just not going to happen for him. And then I think the Broncos could put up some points in this game as well. Chicago's secondary will likely would be without starting safety Eddie Jackson, as well as 3 cornerbacks, most notably Jalen Johnson, who ranks 3rd in coverage grade by PFF.
All right, well, let's move away from the Caleb Williams sweepstakes and shift it over to our next segment, the Injury Watch. So we've got to keep an eye out in New Orleans as their starting quarterback went down last week. What's going on there?
Well, Saints head coach Dennis Allen said that quarterback Derek Carr has a sprained AC joint and is considered week to week. And to me, that indicates that he's probably going to be out at least a couple of weeks, which means, here we go, backup quarterback Jameis Winston, famous time. Jameis has averaged 6.2 yards per pass play since coming to New Orleans across 10 starts in 15 games, which is pretty solid. But I would say Winston is about 2 points worse than Carr, according to our numbers. Now, Winston is going to have to contend with plenty of interior pressure in this matchup as defensive tackle Vita Vea has 2 sacks, which ranks 3rd among interior defenders, and the 350-pounder has a favorable matchup because Saints center Eric McCoy ranks 5th worst in pass blocking efficiency, and Saints starting guard Cesar Ruiz is likely out with a concussion. So Winston collapsing pockets, but when he does have time, we know he can bomb it downfield.
Yeah, and we also saw the Raiders QB hop into the concussion protocol despite playing the whole game. What's going on there?
Well, Aiden McConnell had a great preseason, but it looks like the Raiders would go with Brian Hoyer if Jimmy Garoppolo is unable to clear concussion protocol. And Hoyer has just 73 dropbacks in the last 6 seasons. So it's hard to gauge how much he has left in the tank. He hasn't got extended playing time since 2017 when he was 32 years old, and he's now 38 years old. And even in 2017 with Kyle Shanahan, he managed just 5.1 yards per pass play and went 0-6 in his starts. And for reference, Jimmy Garoppolo was on that same team after he got traded. Jimmy went 5-0 with Kyle Shanahan in 2017 and averaged 8.1 yards per pass play. And so Jimmy is still in his prime. Hoyer is clearly over the hill. And we don't, think of Jimmy Garoppolo being a borderline top 10 quarterback, but he might be worth 3 points above his backup in this situation.
Yeah, and we saw the Bengals, they decided to play Burrow through that injury, and he was able to scrape together a win, but it wasn't pretty. What'd you see from him out there?
Well, Burrow is averaging just 4.2 yards per pass play this season, and his calf is noticeably bothering him. His lack of mobility in the pocket will be a problem on this Sunday, as Tennessee's edge rushers Danico Audrey and Arden Key have 23 pressures already, and Cincinnati's tackles Orlando Brown and Jonah Williams have combined to surrender 6 quarterback hits, the most among any tackle tandem in the NFL. And that's, partially on the tackles, but partially just because Joe Burrow is basically a statue back there, and the Titans will know that Burrow is trying to get the ball out quickly and not take hits. So I think they're going to play pretty aggressively on Sunday.
Yeah, and it looks like Carolina has caught the injury bug. Who's banged up and how much is this going to impact them?
Well, yeah, the injuries are really starting to pile up on Carolina's defense. The Panthers were already without starting linebacker Shaq Thompson and cornerback J.C. Horn, who ranked 21st in PFF coverage grade last year. And Carolina backup cornerback C.J. Henderson will struggle across from Justin Jefferson, who is averaging 2.81 yards per route run, 3rd in the NFL.
Yeah, that's the last guy you want to match up against. But we saw a couple big names go down against Seattle, too.
Yeah, I mean, the Panthers also lost in Seattle safety Xavier Woods and linebacker Frankie Louvu. And Louvu's 15 stops ranked fourth in the NFL. And Carolina's defense surrendered scores on 4 of the Seahawks' 5 second half drives without Thompson, Horn, Woods, and Louvu on the field. So you can see with all the injuries piling up, it just wasn't able for them to put together a reasonable defensive performance. And the Panthers are allowing 8.2 yards per target to tight ends, which ranks 27th in the NFL. And no Thompson, no Woods in the secondary is going to provide a favorable matchup for Vikings tight end TJ Hawkinson, who's averaging 9 targets per game.
Yeah, and we saw the Rams, they lost their left tackle last week. What's going on with that situation?
Well, the Rams had a 50% success rate last week in the first half, which ranked 9th in the NFL among week 3 first half offenses. But then they lost starting left tackle Alaric Jackson and backup left tackle Zach Thomas was horrible. Thomas surrendered 2 sacks and 3 hurries on only 26 pass blocking snaps. And I think that Sean McVay is clearly regretting not moving Joe Noteboom out to left tackle and replacing Jackson with Thomas, and he's not going to make that mistake again this week. Noteboom got 325 snaps at left tackle last season. He's the clear choice to replace Jackson if he is unable to go. And with Noteboom out there at left tackle, our numbers indicate that Jackson is only worth 0.4 points if he's out. Now, fortunately, it doesn't sound like Jackson's injury will be a long-term one, with McVay saying that the Rams are taking it one day at a time as they prepare to face the Colts, and his status is still unclear for the game, but they hope that he can go. Regardless, the Colts defense has only a 30% pressure rate, which ranks 28th in the NFL. And that's despite facing Baltimore's offensive line without 2 starters and Houston's offensive line without 4 starters in consecutive games.
Yeah, okay. Speaking of the Ravens, what's going on with them? I mean, the injuries are obviously hurting them, and I think that led pretty much to their loss last week.
Yeah, I mean, at the time of this recording, it seems like they're going to get back fully healthy on the offensive line, which would be huge versus Cleveland's defense. However, Lamar might be without Odell and Rashad Bateman at wide receiver. Now, I think offensive coordinator Todd Monken can counter this by using a little bit more 12 personnel, as Isaiah Likely is a solid tight end next to Mark Andrews. And then they got Zay Flowers and Nelson Aguilar. They're not great wide receivers, but they're not significantly worse than basically what Lamar has had his entire career. And on defense, the Ravens are getting back safety Marcus Williams, which will help get Kyle Hamilton closer to the line of scrimmage, which was what they like to do on that side of the ball. However, it might be another week for cornerback Marlon Humphrey to be out, and the Ravens could be without both starting edge rushers in Odafe Oweh and Ajabo. So they signed Kyle Van Noy to the practice squad, which is usually a move that indicates they think they're in trouble at edge rusher. So you get Williams back, but you lose 2 edge rushers. It's pretty tough. Overall, Baltimore swapping Stanley, Linderbaum, and Williams. Those injuries for Odell, Bateman, Oweh, and Ajabo injuries basically puts them in the exact same spot that they were in going into last week. But it's just like, we get these guys back healthy, and now we got 4 more guys injured. It's crazy in Baltimore right now.
They feel like the one team that is actually hurt every single year. So many players. I don't get it. I don't know if they need a new trainer or I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me. But let's look at the Cowboys, because they fall back into O-line injury troubles, and this one looks pretty bad to me.
Yeah, Dallas only managed 16 points last week in Arizona without 3 starting offensive linemen. And the status of Tyron Smith, Tyler Biadasz, and Zach Martin is definitely worth monitoring as we head into Sunday. There's 17 Pro Bowls combined between the 3, and Patriots edge rusher Matthew Judon has 13 pressures, ranking 10th, and interior defender Christian Barmore ranks 4th in pass rushing efficiency. So Cowboys, Stephen Jones, president, said you've got to just take each guy week by week. We know Zach Martin he rarely misses any time. Tyrone is working through something with his knee, and we're going to monitor all of them, and we don't know for sure if all of them are going to be back. So we saw them working on the side on Wednesday, practice, all rehabbing. I'd like to see them get a limited practice in either Thursday or Friday. But, it could be trouble if those 17 Pro Bowls, again, are on the sideline this week against that Patriots pass rush.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got public opinion talk with me. We are coming off of another great week of NFL football, and as always, we've got the public making some scorching hot takes, but they just might be right with some of these. So let's start with CJ Stroud is the real deal. He's the best rookie QB in this class, and he looks better than anyone from the class before him as well.
Well, I mean, that certainly seems right coming out of the gates here. Stroud ranks the best among the rookie quarterbacks at 19th in EPA per play, and his offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick, has gotten the offensive line to 14th in pass blocking efficiency despite missing 4 of the 5 projected starters in training camp. And Texans rookie center Jared Patterson is conceded just 3 pressures, the fewest of all rookies with at least 100 pass blocking snaps. And Patterson and guard Shaq Mason will contain Steelers interior defender Larry Ogunjobi this week, who ranks 17th in pass rushing efficiency.
Yeah, and this passing attack has been great so far. Do you expect this to continue?
Well, Stroud is throwing past the sticks on 47% of his passes, 6th highest in the league. And Pittsburgh's secondary surrendered a league high 13 explosive receptions to wide receiver. However, it isn't all good news for Houston's passing offense this week. Stroud was pressured on 73% of his dropbacks against the blitz when they played Baltimore last week. And the patchwork Texans offensive line just doesn't seem to have the reps to communicate on these blitzes. And it looks like starting left tackle Laramie Tunsil could miss another week.
Yeah, that's not good about Tunsil. If he misses, who's going to fill his spot?
Yeah, I mean, Tunsil was limited in practice all last week, and we talked last week on the podcast. We thought he would be coming back, but then he was a late scratch, and then he wasn't practicing to start this week. And Tunsil's backup, Josh Jones, leads the NFL with 3 holding penalties, but even he's banged up, so it could get even worse for Houston. They could be down to their 10th offensive lineman if Jones is unable to suit up, and the Steelers have a 36% blitz rate, which ranks 10th highest, and you know they're going to dial it up on that side of the ball if the Texans show that they can't communicate on blitzes again this Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely want Tunsil out there with guys like Watt on that D line, but you've got 2 receivers that are playing as good as they are in Houston. I mean, you can just let the ball kind of fly, right?
Well, I mean, those receivers you're referring to, Tank Dell and Nico Collins, ranked 5th and 6th, respectively, in EPA per target. Although I kind of think the pair is likely to be contained this week as Pittsburgh cornerback Patrick Peterson ranks 18th in coverage grade by PFF, and cornerback Joey Porter has allowed just 12 yards on 5 targets to start his NFL career. So we could see those Houston wide receivers come back to earth a little bit this week.
All right, well, let's shift it over to what the public has been waiting for, the main event of the evening. In the blue corner, we've got a fighter with a record of 1-2, standing at 6 feet 0 inches and 192 pounds, Marshawn Lattimore. And he will be facing off against his rival, who stands at a whopping 6 feet 5 inches and 231 pounds, Mike Evans. I mean, I always love to see this matchup. I mean, I hope they fight again this week, but actually, what do we see on the field when they match up?
Well, I mean, Marshawn Lattimore leads the NFL this year with 5 combined interceptions and pass breakups, and Lattimore is obviously notorious for his battles with Mike Evans, who is averaging just 44.8 yards per game in his career versus Lattimore. And the New Orleans defense has a 40% man coverage rate, which ranks 2nd, and Evans leads the NFL with a 57% target rate against man coverage. So the Buccaneers offense this week will likely come down to whether Evans can win his matchup across from Lattimore. And everyone, grab your popcorn because this one is going to be a good one.
All right, and looking at our next public opinion, if you've turned on a Tennessee football game this year, you might have noticed that Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry could possibly both be washed. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, Tennessee's offense is actually gaining 6.7 yards per play on first down, which ranks 4th in the NFL. They've been great when opposing pass rushers can't tee off on Ryan Tannehill. But the trouble is when the Titans get in 2nd and 3rd and long, they cannot stop opposing pass rushes. The Titans are averaging just 2.8 yards per play on 2nd down and a league low 1.5 yards per play on 3rd down. Now, Cincinnati's defense ranks 26th in EPA per rush. So Tennessee will focus on feeding Derrick Henry to stay out of obvious passing situations. And as long as they can get it into 3rd and manageable, or even convert before they get to 3rd down, we could see Tennessee's offense finally put some points on the board this week.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first year in a long time that we've seen Derrick Henry honestly not look great. But is this a lot to do with just poor O-line play?
Well, yeah, I mean, if Henry can't do it this week against Cincinnati's defense, I think we have to start considering that he is indeed washed. But his offensive line certainly isn't helping him. I mean, left tackle Andre Dillard has surrendered 6 sacks, while no other tackle in the league has allowed more than 3 sacks. And Tannehill's blindside is going to be in real trouble in this game, as Bengals edge rusher Trey Hendrickson had 2 sacks, 1 quarterback hit, and 7 hurries last week, and he'll be lining up across from Dillard on Sunday.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got stock up, stock down. Whose stock are you buying right now?
I'm buying Trevor Lawrence stock. So the Jaguars have lost a league high 15 expected points from drops alone this year. And Trevor Lawrence is pretty much balling despite the drops. He's averaging 6 yards per pass play despite his wide receivers letting him down. And Lawrence ranks top 5 in both short and deep passing grades by PFF this year. And if you've watched the Jaguars play, I don't think you can blame their offensive troubles on Lawrence at all. Now, Falcons safety Jesse Bates is co-leading the NFL with 3 interceptions, and Lawrence will try to take Bates out of the equation this week by throwing those out routes to Calvin Ridley, who's one of the best route runners in the NFL. And I think we could see a big game from both of those guys on Sunday morning.
Yeah, I think Ridley's due. I think he has a touchdown drop in the previous 2 games. But whose stock are you selling right now?
Well, I'm going to sell high on the Dolphins offense. I mean, you couldn't be higher than the Dolphins offensive stock right now. And the reason I'm selling high this week, so Miami's offense leads the NFL with an 83% pre-snap motion rate. And Mike McDaniels likes to use this motion to give Tua a hint about the coverage and mess with the defensive coverage rules. And the Dolphins' scheme uniqueness is typically what gives them such an advantage each week, but they're not going to be as successful with the scheme uniqueness this week because Buffalo's defense has as much familiarity as anyone. This will actually be the 4th time the Bills have gone against Mike McDaniel's offense.
Yeah, what can the Bills do to stop the Dolphins from what they've been doing?
Well, they've been using that short motion and getting Tyreek Hill on in-breaking routes. In fact, all 9 of Tyreek Hill's receptions last week came on in breaking routes. But Buffalo's defense is simply not going to let this happen. They have 2 former all-pro safeties, and nickelback Taron Johnson is being targeted on just 1 in every 16.8 cover snaps, which is the highest among any nickelback, and he's allowing less separation than any cornerback in the NFL. And then the Bills have cornerback Tre'Davious White, who ranks 13th in PFF coverage grade, to limit Jalen Waddle, who's returning from a concussion.
Yeah, and do you expect the Bills up front to kind of get after Tua?
I think so. I mean, we saw Buffalo's defense with a 69% pressure rate on Sam Howell last week, and Ed Oliver leads all interior defenders in pass rushing efficiency, and Oliver has a favorable matchup this week because Miami's center Connor Williams is likely out, and Williams was conceding just a 1% pressure rate this year, while backup Liam Eichenberg surrendered a 7% pressure rate last season.
All right, well, let's shift it over to our next segment. We've got the weather of the week.
Yeah, and across the NFL, we're looking at pretty solid scoring conditions. Good weather, not a lot of wind or precipitation to worry about. So this week for weather of the week, I thought we'd head out to London and talk about our first game on Wembley Field. It's a grass field, and it looks like there's going to be about 10-mile-per-hour winds with some humidity in London. So that could give more trouble than all the weather we're seeing in North America this week. And I don't really think we're going to give a whole lot of home field to the Jags. I know that they've done this trip more than any team in the NFL, but both teams are traveling about equal distance this week from Jacksonville and Atlanta. So I don't know. I lean a little bit under here just because Wembley Field can sometimes get a little bit mushy. It's not necessarily made for football conditions. And this is definitely a must-win for Jacksonville as their postseason chances drop below 50% after getting upset last week. So this London game is almost must-win territory, and I'll certainly be excited to see it on Sunday morning.
Does time change have anything to do in your model here?
Well, we did factor that in last year's Germany game. So the Buccaneers only had to move 6 time zones, while the Seahawks had to move nine time zones. And the game was kicking off, I believe it was at 6:30 a.m. local time for the Seahawks. And so we had a best bet on the Buccaneers in that game. Now, this game in London, both teams traveling equal distance, equal amount of time zones, and both teams will have their internal clocks at the same time. So not making a major adjustment for time zones in this game, but I'm not saying that we always wouldn't be making adjustments for these international games.
All right. Well, let's shift it over to our DraftKings player of the slate. You picked Jonathan Mingo last week, and he left early with a concussion, but the other two Panthers receivers put up 31 and 18 points respectively. So who do you got this week?
Well, it was a little bit disappointing to see Mingo go out so early because the Panthers did have a good passing offense like we expected going into week 3. But this week, I'm going to take Josh Palmer at 4,000. He might have high ownership in tournaments. I'm not really sure what to project for him, but he seems like a smash in double ups. At minimum. And people might get enthusiastic about rookie Quentin Johnson taking over for Big Mike. So Palmer could slip through the cracks and he might be worth a play in big fields as well. Now, I just don't think Quentin Johnson is ready to play in the NFL right now. He only has 28 yards on 38 routes this season, and Palmer has run 93 routes. And now we've got Justin Herbert in a dome, and Palmer should be in line for at least 40 routes on Sunday. So in 11 regular season absences from Keenan Allen and Mike Williams last season, Josh Palmer averaged 9.7 targets and 70 yards per game. Now, he only got 3 touchdowns, but touchdowns a little bit noisy. I could see Palmer finding the end zone this week, and certainly 70 yards and a touchdown at $4,000 as a cost seems good to me.
Yeah, that sounds like a winner to me there. But let's shift it over to our primetime preview. We've got the Kansas City Chiefs at the New York Jets. What do you got for us in this one?
We're going to have a bet on the Jets plus 9.5 over Kansas City this Sunday night. I'm going to go through an exercise in the primetime preview this week to show people how you can put a price on the game in terms of power rating. So we're going to start. We faded the Jets last week against New England, but I think the market has gone too far. Basically, at the current market price, they are implying that the Jets are 4.5 points worse than an average NFL team. And the Jets hovered around 2 points worse than average in market last season when Zach Wilson was the starter, and they improved the roster in the offseason.
Yeah, how did they improve this roster over the offseason?
Well, they brought in Adrian Amos to replace safety LaMarcus Joyner, who ranked 56th among 65 qualifying safeties in PFF coverage grade. And I think we can expect Amos to be better for the Jets than Joyner was at safety last season. And New York's defense upgraded on defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins with Quentin Jefferson, who had nearly twice as many pressures as Rankins in 2022. And Jefferson has started this year with a 14% pressure rate, which is on par with his all-pro teammate Quinnen Williams. So let's be conservative here and say that those two upgrades on defense are just worth a half point. So to get from where the Jets were in market last year to where the market is saying the Jets are now, that would mean that Wilson would need to be 3 points worse than he was last season. I'm open to the fact that Wilson is slightly worse, playing with a little bit less confidence after getting embarrassed in the last 2 games, but he's not 3 points worse.
Yeah, I was going to say, isn't the 3-point difference like a lot here?
Yeah, I mean, 3 points from a quarterback change is basically the difference between Kirk Cousins and Desmond Ridder. So for you to agree with the market price on the Jets right now, you'd basically have to say that the 2022 Zach Wilson to 2023 Zach Wilson is the same as the gap from Kirk Cousins to Desmond Ridder. So to sum it up, the Jets are very unlikely to be more than 3 points worse than an average NFL team. And we have home field worth 2 points in this game, according to our numbers. So we got Kansas City among the league's elite. This is certainly not us fading the Chiefs. We have them right on market. But even then, I don't think that they can be favored by more than 8 here. And our model favors the Chiefs by 7.9 with a predicted total of 43.0.
Yeah, I think that's a good bet. It worries me a little bit here because it feels like there's a chance that Zach Wilson might not even be able to get on the scoreboard here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the concern. That's the reason the market has gone as far as it is. But sometimes the stinkiest bets are the best bets to make, and that's why we power rate of all the teams. And that, that's how we handicap, and we know when to play these big home dogs. So it's not going to feel great, pushing the button to bet the Jets this week, but there is value there. I think it's at least 3.5% value, and it could be up to 5% value on the Jets at home this week.
All right. Well, thanks for walking us through that. We've got one more thing, and that is your primetime prop of the week. Last week, we won with Jaylen Warren over 2.5 receptions, and that's 2 weeks in a row now. You're kind of on a heater. What do you have for us this week?
Well, this week, I've got Patrick Mahomes' longest completion under 37.5 yards. And so we can look at it. I mean, he's been most of his deep shots this year have been to Justin Watson or MVS on the outside. But the Jets, DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner ranked 9th and 11th in coverage grade by PFF among cornerbacks. And the Jets run quarters at a top 5 rate in the NFL. They're certainly trying to keep the opposing offenses in front of them. And I think they're going to take a similar approach to what they did to Josh Allen in week 1, basically take away everything downfield. And Allen's long completion in week 1 was just 26 yards when he played in that Monday Night Football game. So Mahomes won't want to make the same mistake as Allen, who threw 3 interceptions in that game. I think Mahomes is just going to take what's given to him underneath. And 37.5 yards, pretty long completion for one of the best defenses in the NFL to give up. So I'll take under Patrick Mahomes' longest completion on Sunday night.
I love it. I think that's a good one. If you watch the Chiefs the last couple of years, he's learned to kind of just take what's given, and they hit a lot of those boring short routes now. But I think that will do it for our week 4 preview. Make sure to head over to drbobsports.com to check out the free analysis for this weekend. And we will be back next Friday for week 5. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe.